There are new federal rules that make it harder to get narcotic painkillers. And these rules, well-intentioned as they might be, are creating some issues for veterans who depend on some of these prescription drugs for things like missing limbs, post-traumatic stress. Let's put it in perspective as we are joined now by Michael Barnes, who is Executive Director for CLAAD, that is the Center for Lawful Access and Abuse Deterrence. The Twitter handle is @MCBTTweets or @CLAAD_coalition. I'll spell them out for you again, but let's first welcome Michael Barnes to the program. Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on, Tim.
Let's talk about these regulations. First of all, coming from where? The Drug Enforcement Administration?
Yes, the Drug Enforcement Administration last summer implemented new rules that require that there be no refills on certain types of hydrocodone products, combination products, and that was new in that previously it was possible for Americans to get refills of those sorts of medications. And so the issue is that veterans and many other people are having difficulty now getting the medications that they've been accustomed to taking and that they need.
What was the intent of the regulation? In other words, what was the problem that they were trying to address?
Well, as you likely know, we're in the midst of a prescription drug abuse epidemic, and so the DEA was trying to increase the restrictions on these types of medications, the hydrocodone medications, so that it would cause prescribers to think twice before writing a prescription and make sure that there were greater protections in place from the prescriber and the dispenser pharmacist point of view. The problem is that I think that many patient populations were not prepared, and we definitely see that many of the physicians who are subject to these new rules were not prepared, and the result is that the patients are suffering.
All right, so what is the suggested solution for this?
Well, our organization is actually working under the theme this entire year of trying to encourage greater compassion on both sides of the prescription drug abuse issue. We need to make sure that we deal with the issues of abuse, but when we're doing so, we need to make sure that we're also having compassion for the people who need the medications that are otherwise being pretty heavily restricted. That's the point of our organization, in fact. But with respect to this particular rule, I don't think there's any likelihood that it's going to be possible to roll it back. What we can do is use this as an example of how to be a little bit more thoughtful and to better prepare in advance before implementing new policies and programs to reduce prescription drug abuse. And then, of course, go ahead.
I was just going to say, are there any ways to work around this regulation? Obviously, it creates a bit of another burden, I guess, on veterans. On the other hand, it doesn't seem like it's insurmountable necessarily.
It draws attention to the need for healthcare providers really to give thought to a more comprehensive plan of care for veterans and anyone who has pain or other conditions for which these powerful controlled substance medications are necessary. So, for example, instead of just writing a prescription for 30 days for particular medication and telling somebody to come back in 30 days, especially when you know they can't get an appointment for 5 months, why don't you think about what would be a plan that would enable that person to deal with the pain over the course of those 5 months? Put that into place from the get-go instead of just thoughtlessly sending someone out with a 30-day prescription.
You've got another point in there that I think is an important one to raise, and that is that there's a doctor shortage among those who treat veterans, and as a result of that, getting a prescription refill is more than just calling your doctor and saying, can I get this?
Yes, absolutely. The VA is a whole other story in and of itself with all the patient backlogs and the inadequacy of the care there. And so, yes, that's a more complex problem. But in looking at the issue of prescription drug abuse, generally, we've been focusing a great deal on prescriber education and actually prescribing standards to make sure that the people who want to prescribe these medications appropriately learn how to do so. And those who choose to prescribe them inappropriately need to be enforced against and lose their license or go to jail.
Is there any way, any possibility that the DEA might think of a way to have waivers or to sort of re-examine this regulation?
Unfortunately, I don't think that's realistic at all. Having worked in this field and seen the DEA and its approach to a regulation of this sort, I don't think it's going to demonstrate that type of flexibility. So I think we're going to have to find a way to work around this bad situation for veterans and others, and most importantly, ensure that future programs and policies don't have this sort of impact.
And how many veterans are affected, in your estimation, by this regulation?
Well, we know that about half of the veterans who are returning now from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are coming back with chronic pain, and that's according to a study from JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. So in addition to pain, they also have PTSD, anxiety, and other conditions for which controlled substances are necessary, and that includes the disease of addiction itself. So we really need to give them the greatest attention. They certainly have earned the greatest health care possible. They're not receiving that, but they should be at the cutting edge of what is best, and then serve as models that we can then extend to the rest of the United States for ideal health care programs. We've got a long way to go, I think, before we get there.
Michael, I appreciate you spending time with us. What's a website in case people want information?
We're at CLAAD.org, CLAAD.org.
Michael, thank you for being on POTUS.
Thank you, Tim.
Michael Barnes, Executive Director for CLAAD, Center for Lawful Access and Abuse Deterrence, on these new federal regulations that make it a little more difficult for refilling prescriptions and other ways of acquiring these painkillers, which are narcotics. But because of this, there are some new, burdens to bear for some of these veterans who need these medications, and that is one of the issues they're concerned about. These regulations are not going to be changed, but as he said, this is to call attention that maybe a little more thought has to be given before some of these regulations are put in place. The Twitter handle at MCBT tweets, at MCBTWEETS, or at CLAAD, CLAAD _coalition.